Welcome to the Fantasy Football Report. I'm Blair Andrews here with Kevin Szafraniec. Hassan is on vacation, but it's all good. We've got a great guest, Mat Irby. You know him from his work at RotoViz. You know him from the great work he's doing at Legendary Upside currently. Matt, how's it going?
Hey, I'm doing great. How you doing?
Doing well. Yeah, it's an interesting week for football, for fantasy football. I guess we should just jump right into kind of the lead story on this show sheet, which is this Commanders Bears game, which pretty boring for the first 55 minutes, but we have obviously this Hail Mary to Noah Brown from Jaden Daniels. I guess does where are we putting Jaden Daniels in the MVP race so far this year?
I think he's number one. If you just use kind of traditional criteria, where the team was before he came and where they are now, the way he's playing, the offense is number one in EPA per play, EPA per dropback. He's just been phenomenal. He's changed everything.
Yeah, I guess when you're thinking of other MVP candidates, it's like Daniels, before this week, maybe you could say Lamar. I don't know if there are other quarterbacks that are like, the Chiefs undefeated, but it's not like Mahomes has been playing well enough to justify being in that conversation. So, yeah, there really aren't a lot of names that you necessarily spring to mind for this outside of Daniels. So, yeah, it's pretty awesome to see what he's doing as a rookie. I don't know if his performance today was very good for a lot of fantasy teams, but certainly fun to watch.
Yeah, and I think Jared Goff was in there for about a week or so. Everybody was kind of talking about him for a week, and then he kind of put up a dud today. But I mean, like you said, Daniels really he didn't get that passing TD until the Hail Mary, and about like 50 of his 300 some yards came on the Hail Mary. So overall, it wasn't really that great of a day till the end. But I mean, like say what he's doing is I know it's pretty awesome. Kind of like what Matt was saying. It sometimes it doesn't register. Like it's what I'm thinking about because I'm just so used to the same names. But then like, oh yeah, there's Jaden Daniels who's taken this team that earned the number 2 pick, and now they're 6-2. Is that where they're at right now? So it is amazing what he's doing, and this kind of adds to like that legend of Jaden Daniels. This is like I don't know if you want to call it like a keystone sort of performance or something that's really going to like stick in people's heads going forward. Oh, you remember that Hail Mary that he had against the Bears? And it's also awesome that it comes against, Caleb Williams, who was drafted ahead of him. So,
yeah, that's a good kind of contrast to talk about, especially as it regards your fantasy teams. Like, what are you doing with Caleb Williams, who's, for this game, unstartable, even in Superflex leagues? I guess the best way to ask the question is where do you think he will be ranked for best ball drafts next year or redraft leagues?
I think so much of it is still yet to be written. I mean, that's true with all of these conversations, of course.
Yeah.
There's always that caveat. Like we're talking about this now, like last year, Dak Prescott was firmly in the MVP conversation by the end of the year. But at this time last year, he was being talked about as, he had a very, very bad start to the season. And then, of course, they turned it on after the bye. So much of this is going to change, obviously.
Yeah.
As far as that goes, of course, we're waiting for back-weighted production from him. Also, not for nothing, Dan Quinn is a really incredible defensive coordinator. And while we may have it still in our mind that Washington's defense is really bad, they've really turned it on in the last few weeks, and they did a great job today as well. So I think we probably need to start kind of thinking about them a little differently.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. No, that showed up in like the advanced stats that I was looking at for my article this week. Is such a just a few weeks ago we were talking about Washington as like the worst passing defense in the league, and now they're already looking like, certainly not one of the best units, but maybe above average at least. So yeah, it has been an interesting transformation throughout the organization.
I mean, 3 weeks ago they were so far and away the worst defense by EPA per play. Like it was almost like they were lapping the field. But now they've in just a few weeks they've moved up the charts, and I expect them to continue that way. They'll probably end up somewhere in the middle to top, 15 in the league.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, well, speaking of worst pass defenses in the league, down there in Atlanta, they might have been facing the new crowned worst passing defense in the league in Tampa Bay. Seems to be like just bludgeoning production to passing offenses. You say Kirk Cousins had a good game, went 23 of 29 for 276 yards and 4 TDs. And 2 of those TDs went to Kyle Pitts. And then you know what Joe King says? Did you hear that it's National Tight End Week? I don't think they mentioned it once. So, Pitts caught 4 or 5 targets for 91 yards. Darnell Mooney actually had 1 more yard than Pitts, but he also led the team with 7 targets, 5 catches. Is this just a case of the Buccaneers being bad, or can we expect Atlanta to turn around? Because I when I was looking up stuff for the show, I did see that Cousins has only had more than 15 fantasy points in three games this season, including today. So is this just the Falcons defense or the Buccaneers defense being bad, or is Atlanta actually turning it on?
I do think that it's probably a little bit of both in this case. I feel like, from the start of the year, Atlanta obviously came out really, really sluggish. They brought in a new play caller that had never called plays before, whole new regime, whole new quarterback coming off of a really terrible injury. He's a quarterback that has historically relied so much on play action, and it's very clear that he has difficulty with his mobility to turn around and do the things that you need to do from under center. And so he's had to have some adjustments. So you just have a lot of people that are kind of getting into the groove of it. So I do feel like Atlanta is actually coming along. I don't know why. I have good feelings about PFF Zach. But Zach Robinson is he's at least got a really impressive lineage. He's doing the right things with his play calling. Certainly feels to me like Kirk Cousins is starting to get used to things, ramp up. I feel like Atlanta is actually a team that we should kind of believe in by now.
Yeah, I think I'm on board with that. I mean, they certainly have the personnel to be that kind of team, and we saw, it's not where we shouldn't be giving up on Kyle Pitts yet. He's still maybe got some fantasy value. Yeah, I mean, Pitts is a really interesting case of this, because if you can see the Falcons turning it on, maybe he's a big beneficiary. Does this performance kind of move him back into the conversation of the top tight ends in the league for you?
Man, it's such a crowded field up there. I mean, he's certainly in the conversation. I feel like two explosives today in a game that was. It seemed like the pace was. I haven't looked into the stats on that, but it seems like the pace was pretty quick on that one. There might have been a pretty high play volume in that game, and he still only got 4 receptions. So it's not like he had a massive volume day.
Yeah.
That volume is still going. well, a lot of it's going to Darnell Mooney, but that volume is still going in other places. But he had the 2 explosive plays, and he does have that. I mean, that's part of his toolkit, so that has to be factored in. But like, obviously, it's going to be more volatile.
Yeah. Certainly fast on the Bucs side. Baker Mayfield with 50 pass attempts, 10 of those going to Cade Otton, sticking with the National Tight End Week. Yeah, I mean, is Otton just like the number 1 target in Tampa Bay now?
It's hard to know that yet, because obviously we have a very small sample size of just one game. It certainly was somebody that we had our eye on as possibly taking on some of the volume. I think I was really more impressed that the Bucs were still so functional on offense.
Yeah, good point. Good point.
I really did expect there to be a considerable change. So much of what they do runs through those 2 guys. And I mean, Mike Evans is not just a fantastic receiver. He's also their kind of clear out guy. And so I just really kind of felt like everything was going to condense and tighten. It was going to get a lot harder to get those targets in the middle of the field and stuff. So, I don't know exactly where Otton caught all of his balls, but usually the tight ends operate in the middle of the field. The fact that he was able to find enough room to work, though, kind of surprised me.
Mm.
Yeah, it was just the way that his production has been upticking over the last 4 weeks or so. I think, like we've talked about it, like every week on the waivers. So after like the first 3 weeks, we're all kind of stinkers. But I mean, since then he's been averaging 7-8 targets a game, and now with this, what I thought was kind of surprising. Like, I do think Otton will be the primary target for however long. But like Bucky Irvin was second on the team in targets. Bucky, I was kind of surprised that especially coming in with an injury designation, that he really corralled as much work. He led the backfield in carries, and he was second on the entire team in targets. So I mean, it was nice seeing Jalen McMillan was actually tied with him with 7 targets. But I mean, overall, those are the guys that we wanted to get the ball. If we did want Cade Otton to get the ball, the guys that we wanted to get the ball seem to be getting the ball outside of Sean Tucker.
So to Matt's point, it looks like Cade Otton had an ADOT of 4.4 in this game, right? So really close to the line of scrimmage. Second target earner, Bucky Irving, had an ADOT of negative 2.9. So, yeah, not having Evans and Godwin on the field does seem to change, kind of the level where the ball goes, at least, if not other things. But I mean, it certainly changes other things too.
And then they lost Shepard too. I don't know how bad that injury is going to be, but
yeah,
I think that could also. He's definitely a candidate to work that intermediate level.
Yeah, I didn't see any latest. He did left the contest in the second quarter, but was cleared for the second half. So maybe he's okay. I'm calling it a hamstring injury, but it seems like he went back in the game. So hopefully he's good to go. Because that does, between him and McMillan, they're kind of the only targets it seems Tampa Bay has who are catching targets down the field or earning targets down the field. So,
do you guys feel like that Buccaneers backfield will ever untangle in favor of Irving, or do you think it's going to remain that way?
Well, I hope so. I mean, Rachaad White, for all his warts, has been playing a little bit better in the last few games. And it seems like one of those things where the team kind of wants to stick to their guns more so. I mean, it's nice that Bucky got more work than him, but I mean, ideally we would like to see, Bucky and Sean Tucker over, Rachaad White just being involved whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, White did get the touchdown today, the receiving touchdown. He still looks pretty good when he's catching the ball. And he actually wasn't that bad as a runner today either. But yeah, I think there's probably not very much chance of Rachaad White just going away. So, I'm approaching this backfield as one that has value for multiple guys, but it's hard to see anyone pulling away. Like, I'm still starting Bucky Irving in a lot of leagues because I'm desperate, but you know, he's performing well enough, I think. So
yeah, I have him in a lot of places. I've actually tried to shop him a little bit. I think it's possible that the players that are in your league are also worried about the same things, of course. But he also has a pretty brutal schedule coming up, and it just feels like to me like White isn't going away. So as much as I like Irving, and when I see them, the eye test always gets me a little out of whack. I don't actually trust what I see because it's burned me too much. I think they're all phenomenal athletes, and I tend to get excited about big plays. But, Irving just looks quicker to me. He's just one of those players that always looks super, super quick, like a little jitterbug. White did have a fumble today, but I believe he scored his touchdown after that fumble. He wasn't disengaged from the team because of that. And of course, Irving has fumbled as well. I don't know. I just feel like it's just going to be kind of muddy. So I'm kind of looking to get out of him if I've got a chance to do so.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's hard to see anyone pulling away without an injury, probably. Well, another big news item of this week is the return of Tua Tagovailoa, who, his impact on the Dolphins offense did seem to be pretty big. They put up 27, still lost to the Cardinals, but I mean, I think you have to be encouraged with this Dolphins offense based on how they've looked prior to Tua's return. So, are we comfortable starting guys like Waddle now going forward? Probably. If you weren't before, I kind of wasn't.
Waddle's a sucky one because he's so good. He really, he's already. We forget this guy's. Was he 25? I think he's already been a wide receiver twice in his first 2 years. And Tyreek just gets so much of that cheat motion, and he just takes priority so frequently. It's been a really frustrating world to live in, trying to wait for Waddle. I've tried to pump him up as somebody that we should be acquiring quite a few times, and it's starting to get pretty discouraging. One person that I noted though today that seemed to have so much more space to operate was Achane. He has just run. I don't know his stack box rates and all that stuff, but he just seems like he's been running with no room. And of course, they've just been banging him into the wall because their run rate, I think it's number 1 in the NFL right now. They just do not trust the quarterbacks that they've been putting out there. And they've just been trying to make it work. But I think he's a player that just benefits so much from having everything spread out so much.
Yeah, and it seems like they kind of reverted back to what we saw from them, the first couple of weeks before Tua got hurt, where, Achane got, led the backfield in carries. He had 97 yards, but he's also second on the team in targets, which it seemed like they were trying to get him involved in both phases of that. And, besides Achane getting all those targets, it really did kind of remind me of the 2023 Miami where, Achane had 10 carries for 97 yards. Mostert had 2 touchdowns. This kind of today looked kind of like they did last year, which was kind of nice to see. Is pretty refreshing, minus the Waddle, not really having a great game, but overall, it was nice to see. They played better than I anticipated them. They seemed to pick up pretty quickly. And even during the broadcast, they said that Tua said that his symptoms and stuff were gone the day after he suffered the concussion, which that's what he said. So, You know, it was nice to see, pleasantly surprised with that whole entire Dolphins offense. And once they can get, Waddle rolling back with them too, then I think it's wheels up.
I was surprised to see that Tua didn't have the cap on top of the helmet today. I noticed Achane has been wearing that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that is obviously, I think it's frustrating that Mostert is getting so much of the. He had 2 touchdowns today,
Yeah.
and he definitely was operating in the green zone a lot. But man, with this kind of target share, if that's something that's going to be a part of it, and it has been so far in the games that they've played together,
right?
If that's going to be part of Achane's bag, then he's gonna, sky's the limit for him, especially when he throws these explosive plays in there. If he gets a few of them in one game, he's just going to be money.
Yeah, definitely. He's one of the running backs who can actually hit that expected points double. It seems like there are not many of those guys, and when you find them, they're the guys who are going in like the first half of the first round in redraft. So yeah, I think we definitely could be talking about Achane as a first rounder next year if he keeps up certainly this target share. Yeah, Mostert, it looked like 9 carries, only 19 yards rushing, but he did have the 2 touchdowns, so that might keep him. I don't know. They're not just going to take him off the field. Jalen Wright only 18 yards, but he did it on just 2 carries, so maybe he's looking a little bit more explosive than Mostert at this point, and we could see Wright taking some more of the work, but it does seem like it's Achane is the only back you really want to roster here.
Yeah, so Mostert still has that. I mean, if he's going to be the goal line guy and they get back to moving the ball like they used to, I mean, I could see him throwing him in as like a flex or a spot start, but
yeah.
I don't think that he's the 18. I don't think he's going to score 18 touchdowns or 20 touchdowns he had last year.
That was never going to happen. What he scored?
Yeah.
He scored something crazy, like 12 more touchdowns than he should have, according to base rates, I think, or something crazy like that. It was never going to be quite like that again. But yeah, maybe like almost like a back end tight end, like here's for a touchdown.
Yep.
But another thing is when you're working around the goal line a lot, and I can't speak for all of these carries, but when you're working around the goal line a lot, you're going to have a lot less space to work with, so it brings your yards per carry down.
Sure. That's a good point. On the other side of this game, we had, I think, some encouraging performances from a lot of these Arizona receivers. Trey McBride with 11 targets, 124 yards. Marvin Harrison with 111 yards on 7 targets, and he got a touchdown. Malik Neighbors is still yet to play this week, but if we had to redraft these rookie wide receivers, I don't know. How confident are you in the way we had them ranked to start the season? Is Neighbors still the guy, or is this performance by Harrison kind of making you question whether Neighbors is still number 1?
Well, since week 2, Neighbors has a 42% target share. It's pretty hard to find that. I wouldn't expect it to be quite that high for the rest of the year, but that's just that's just so much that blows away anything we've ever seen from all these like high target earners, really, like Devontae Adams and people like that have just gotten. So CD Lamb last year, was still just operating in the 30s. So something like that it's pretty hard to argue, and you don't see that coming for Harrison, especially with McBride there being such a target earner. The main problem I see, and we can get to I guess we won't get to the Giants because they're not playing. They didn't play today. But one thing that you see with them that I'm a little concerned about, and it's really early in that, but last year they performed so poorly without Andrew Thomas. And I think that he might just mean that much to them. It's not that he's necessarily one of the best left tackles in the game. but he is a good left tackle, and he's somebody that they really, really need. And Jones just crumbles. He just crumbles whenever he's under pressure. He's just so bad at it. And I think we definitely can have a lot more confidence in Kyler Murray holding it together. He's just a lot better quarterback than Jones, and he handles pressure a lot better anyway. So it's a little give and take,
Yeah. Yeah, right. Exactly. You kind of see the 42% target share, but you also see the Giants put up 3 points last week, and versus the Cardinals, who look like they might have a functional offense, and having, Kyler, who's decent, McBride, who takes some defensive attention away. James Conner had a good game, he had a touchdown. But yeah, just
he's had a good year though. He
sure.
had it harder today, but he's had a good year.
Yeah. I was wondering how because I don't even think it's too much of a question. Obviously, Harrison versus Neighbors, but even until Brian Thomas just went out with a chest injury in the fourth quarter. But I think it's more of a like, who would you rather have, Marvin Harrison Jr. versus Brian Thomas Jr.? Like, I think that if the names were reversed, if the juniors were reversed, and Brian Thomas Jr. went to Ohio State and is playing for the Cardinals now versus Marvin Harrison Jr. playing for the Jacksonville Jaguars, I really think that Brian
Thomas Sr. was a Hall of Famer.
Yeah. I think that things would be a little different right now. And I think that really, like, going forward in Dynasty, if we can just clear the names away, I think that the guy playing for Jacksonville might be the guy that I actually want, going forward in Dynasty.
I just made a Dynasty trade. It wasn't this week, it was last week. And I treated him exactly the same as I would have if it had been Harrison or Neighbors.
Yeah.
And I feel like I got a pretty good deal on it. But in my mind, I've got them all pretty much the same.
So Thomas today, did you say he got hurt? I didn't see this game.
He did. He got a chest injury, but he was clearly petitioning to go back in.
Okay.
So at least he thought he was healthy enough to come back, it appeared.
Yeah.
They didn't let him.
I mean, he still had a pretty good game, 60 yards and a touchdown on only 4 targets. Jaguars have been their offense has often looked closer to the way the Giants look than the way they did today. So, that's, I think, always been my concern with Brian Thomas, but he definitely has looked the part of an NFL receiver, one of these top NFL receivers. So, Thomas versus Harrison is an interesting question for me.
Yeah. And I'll just say real quick, the big thing about Brian Thomas too is, coming into the league, we had this vision of him being just a deep threat, a chuck it down the field, and he's working at all levels of the field right now too. So, he is better than I expected him to be. I can tell you that.
Another thing, one other thing that is notable about Thomas, at least for the immediate future, is they have actually, I just got an alert that Christian Kirk is out for the season with a broken collarbone. So, they don't operate necessarily the same way, but, obviously there's no such thing as vacated targets, but the pie gets split up even more, and it could lead to more opportunity for them.
Yeah, that's interesting. Kirk only had 5 targets in this game, but obviously he's kind of one of their top targets, and he didn't play the whole game. So, there's something there as well. Who do you think steps up in that offense? Is it we see a lot more for Ingram? We see just Thomas earning way more targets?
Well, at least today, they seem to play a lot more 12 personnel.
Yeah.
But they're adapting to losing multiple wide receivers in one game.
Right.
And that's what their solution was on the fly. I think Parker Washington is interesting. I just feel like, what's going to end up happening with him, though, is he's just going to be one of those guys that you just never want to play. He's going to probably have some fantasy utility from time to time, but guessing when that's going to be is going to be difficult. And then no upside. He's just never gonna. I'm just always in pursuit of upside, and he just feels like one of those wide receivers that's just always going to be like a low end PPR guy or something at best.
Right.
Yeah, I feel like it's going to be wheels up for both of those guys, and I think it's just going to be super concentrated to Ingram and Thomas. Provided that he's not going to be out, miss any sort of extended amount of time. I feel like even when Ingram first came back, Lawrence really just started peppering him with targets right off the rip. So I like both of those guys. I mean, I've never been a huge Evan Ingram guy, but I think now I maybe if I had a chance to acquire him, I might just jump in and buy in on him now because Lawrence obviously likes throwing the ball to him. They designed the play.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Obviously, he's had a smaller sample size, but I think he came into the week with the highest target share of any tight end.
I think that's right.
If his target share is going up, if that's what we're guessing because of the way that he operates and the way that Christian Kirk operates, I mean, it could be really good for him. At least very comparable to like what we see from David Njoku. I probably agree. I like Njoku's raw ability a little better.
Yeah.
But I mean, it seems like wheels up for Ingram for sure.
I do believe last year when Kirk got hurt is really when Ingram took off as well. I do believe for that last portion of the season. Ingram that's when he like exploded and right. He had 100 and I even remember some ridiculous amount of targets that I like over 150 I want to say by the end of the year. So could be this repeating itself.
Yeah. Well, speaking of more tight ends and National Tight End Week, on the other side of this game, we only had the Packers completing one receiving touchdown thrown by Malik Willis to Tucker Kraft. My question's really about Jaden Reed and what you're doing with him in your lineups. He's had, I want to say now, 2 back-to-back kind of dud games. Is he startable?
I want to hear what you have to say because you were kind of the Reed guy.
I was. Yeah, well, I started him today, and that kind of didn't work out for me. So I'm a little bit maybe I'm a little biased about that from that perspective as well. But like, I guess what's frustrating is that he only had the 3 targets today, but at the same time, this is like a pretty weird game from the Packers where Jordan Love attempts only 22 passes and they still put up 30 points and win the game. Like, I don't think this is a normal game script for Green Bay. And I'm optimistic that we'll see more big games from Reed going forward. You probably, I don't even know. I'd probably project him as good as I was before.
It depends on the injury too. It kind of seemed like it's possible that Love's injury was more significant.
Yeah.
And obviously whenever and Willis, to his credit, he passed a lot better when they gave him the chance to. Their response in general, like when he first took over, was very similar to how the Titans utilized him,
right,
which was basically running like a service academy. And then as he went along, and some credit, of course, probably goes to LaFleur as just being just an incredible play caller. But he really did kind of start to produce. But obviously, if you're going from Jordan Love to Willis, it's going to hurt all of these Packers receivers, I would think. The only one that seems really safe right now, strangely, is Doubs.
Yeah.
But it feels like it felt like Reed had a very defined role. Like, you kind of expected like Watson and Wicks will kind of, you're taking a guess. You might get a touchdown or something, but it really kind of felt like Reed was sort of reserved for something more special that was more every week. And it's a little disappointing, especially in a matchup like this where you really expected it to happen.
Yeah. What I thought was kind of wild is obviously Jordan Love was pretty hobbled. I think that he re-aggravated his knee in the second quarter or something like that. And of course I had I watch on Sunday Ticket, so I have 4 games going at once, and I just kind of click between which I have the sound on. And when I saw that he went out, and when I finally got back to that game, it said groin. I'm like, what are you talking about? It's his groin. Like, we've been watching it this whole entire time. So I was kind of surprised by that. But like I said, I think if Willis ends up starting, obviously, I think pretty much I would, if it's a best ball super flex league, I wouldn't have any problem, rostering Willis, but otherwise it's pretty rough. And I don't think I would really trust many of the guys, many of the Packers receivers. I think we played this game, for those few weeks that Love was out. And I can't remember if Reed was really even startable in any of those weeks. I don't believe he was.
Well, I think he had one kind of fairly, if I remember, I think he had one fairly decent game, but nobody was starting him by then because we had decided that the Packers weren't really going to produce any passing yardage. But you saw that another thing to the Packers, though, Willis comes in, and I don't know if that's why. It may have been part of their game plan to begin with, but you see the huge carry totals for Josh Jacobs yet again. So he popped back up. Right. And that seemed, that correlates very well to how they responded last time.
True. Yeah. Is Jacobs, rest of season, where do you have him ranked in terms of running backs?
Fortunately, I don't work anywhere where I have to do ranks, so I don't have them.
Hypothetically, of course.
I still think of him as very similar to how I already did, which is probably more of like a back end RB1. Mm-hmm. He gets utilization regardless. We don't know if this injury is, if it's a groin. I mean, we're talking about a few weeks here.
Yeah.
They almost immediately kind of like gave him a day off when they came back from the Willis situation last time. If I remember right. So I don't know. I think his usage is going to continue to kind of fluctuate, which we expect anyway.
Yeah.
Right. I don't expect it to always be like this, but while Willis is in there, it's certainly tempting to trust him a little more.
Well, I guess we can also get to what is the most painful game for me, and maybe the
no.
How did it
happen? Saying don't even go to this game.
How did this happen? Yeah. But wait, all right, so are you? Sorry to get behind the curtain to it. So you're a Ravens fan, and you're a Browns fan, right?
I'd say more. I live around Cleveland. I don't know how much, because I pretty much am just kind of jaded Browns fan, especially kind of with their decision on who they had playing quarterback for a while and all that sort of stuff. So it was hard for me to root for them. But yes, I own a lot of Browns memorabilia and clothes.
There you go. Real question is, are you a Cedric Tillman fan? Because that would have really paid off today. He's someone we kind of talked about on Tuesday. We probably talked about him on Sunday too. And I think at the time we were a little bit skeptical that 12 target game would continue. But now we've seen it 2 weeks in a row. They're making a concerted effort to get him the ball. Is he like the top waiver priority if he's still out there?
He might be. This like lends to like a larger picture question. Okay, so Jameis Winston, who we do think is probably like right there at the fringe between starter and backup, right? So he comes in just like Flacco did last year and immediately turns everything on. The thing that seemed like it was so broken that just no progress anywhere. It's so frustrating when you watch the Browns under Watson's reign, because it feels like even when you do something that's good, it gets called back for a penalty or something. Just everything is broken. And then for the second year in a row, we see a quarterback come in. They hadn't even gotten 200 yards in any passing or any game this year. They hadn't even gotten 200 yards passing. Winston comes in, throws for over 300. Watson, I think, scored 2 passing touchdowns in one game so far, and Winston immediately throws 3 touchdowns in this one after coming in and immediately leading him down the field on his only drive last week and scoring a touchdown. So it feels like, and we have like really good opinions about Szafraniec. It's hard to separate yourself from this whole scenario, but when you back up bigger picture, he's one of the more respected play callers. He comes from an excellent lineage. He's always seemed to do the right things. He's an Ivy Leaguer. There's a lot of really good things about him. So it kind of feels like Watson is the problem. Oh, another thing, he's sacked almost 5 times a game.
Yeah.
And today Winston only took 2 sacks. And of course, that's like a stat that'll fluctuate a lot. But just everything feels like it's opened up all of a sudden. And lo and behold, here's Tillman breaking out in these 2 games. So we get pensive about wide receivers that tend to have poor efficiency in their first season and all that stuff. He didn't really show out. He didn't do anything. And that's not really like a template for a winner. But maybe if Watson was the problem all along, I guess you have all that time with Flacco in there too, so you can't say that. But it does feel like maybe he's sort of reanimated Cedric Tillman.
Yeah.
And I haven't had a chance to watch this game yet, but also it was the Szafraniec turned the play calling over to Ken Dorsey for the first time. He's turned the play calling over to any OC his whole entire Browns tenure. So let's say it's like the whole like correlation versus like doesn't equal causation. So we have these 2 variables that are going to plop in together at the same time. So now we're all kind of like, so is it Jameis or could it be Dorsey or, something that Blair and I have talked about after the waiver show or at some point off camera, but like Baltimore seems to play down to some of their competition at times. Like you look at the Raiders game earlier in the Browns. Sometimes it just seems like they might be coasting. So I think that it's kind of hard as somebody who watches the Browns to say, oh, here we go. Here's the Browns. Where as opposed to maybe if they may not, the Ravens may not have put. It's the NFL, so it's hard saying this, but. Maybe they may have been looking to next week already. They say it's just the Browns. We have their number every single time we play them. Like they might not have put their everything into this game.
Yeah.
Well, another thing to think about with the Ravens is that they may not be as good at pass defense as we think. Mm-hmm. We tend to think of they're like a pillar of the NFL, and their defense is like always good, but they're actually 28th in EPA per dropback allowed, which is getting really close to the bottom.
Yeah.
So and they're a funnel. They're a funnel because they're better at run defense than that. So it kind of makes sense. It doesn't make sense that it was the Browns, but it does kind of make sense that they would have these kind of surprising moments where their pass defense lets them down at this point.
No, we saw that when they were playing Tampa Bay too for a while, where it looked like they were going to let the Bucs back in the game because they gave up a lot of big passing plays. So I think that's a good point. I'm obviously like biased as a Ravens fan, thinking that they always lose to teams they should beat pretty easily. Maybe that's not actually the case. Maybe it's just a kind of narrative that I'm buying into. But was a disappointing game for sure from that perspective. I mean, you still had Lamar putting up a decent game. You still had Flowers with 115 yards. Mark Andrews catching another touchdown. He's not getting the targets that we expect to see from Mark Andrews this year, but over the last few games has been able to be efficient. We kind of know that this Ravens offense is good enough to maybe sustain his fantasy value even with lower volume. So are you worried about Mark Andrews rest of season at all?
I am, just because, and I don't know about today, but because they have not used him as much with a lead. They use 2 and 3 tight end formations with a lead, and of course, their pass rate just goes way down. They're just so reactive to when they have a lead to just kind of giving it to Henry. And you can't blame them for that. But I don't think that they will, obviously you didn't expect them to be challenged in this one, but their schedule doesn't look that hard. I feel like they're going to more frequently be ahead than they're going to be behind. And in those instances, I think Andrews will suffer unless things change. I mean, he's playing so well, we never tend to think in those terms, but like coaches are also watching the games too, and they react. So they might be like, you know what, let's get Charlie Kohler out of there and put Andrews in there.
Yeah, I've got a good comment from Uncle Ted here. Bateman got that huge 28-yard catch. Then the Ravens took absolutely 0 shots down the field. I actually haven't gotten a chance to watch this full game yet. But yeah, that does sound like it fits the way they've kind of been playing, where they get kind of conservative with a lead. As you said, they were leading at halftime and then let the Browns come back in it, especially in the third quarter. So
another thing about Winston in this one too is he led like a bona fide game-winning drive and hit Tillman. He kind of split 2 defenders on a pretty long throw. That's the thing about Winston is next week he's going to do something so ridiculously dumb that you're going to be frustrated. But he also has these moments where he is brilliant. Like this is something that's followed him his career. His arm talent is really elite. And when he just happens to put it together, maybe I don't know what it is. If he's just happens to read the defenses correctly versus not correctly, he doesn't get fooled. I don't know. But when he's in control and when he does what he wants to do, it can be really phenomenal. He's a phenomenal talent.
We have a question in the chat. What happened to Lockett today? Absolutely killed my team this week. I don't know if we had the Bills and Seahawks on the show sheet, but obviously DK Metcalf not playing. Maybe you expect a lot more from Lockett. He had 3 targets for 9 yards. Expect a lot more from Jackson Smith and Jigba, who had 7 targets, 69 yards, no touchdowns for anyone on the Seahawks team. They only put up 10 points. Yeah, I mean, what do you make of Lockett for as long as Metcalf is out? Is he startable?
I mean, I don't know. He had some curious usage today. It makes you kind of wonder if there's something else going on too. I mean, you would expect you lose a receiver. I know he and Metcalf play a different way. But you would expect him to get more snaps on like 12 personnel or something like that. And they tended to use Bobo a lot more, even in those looks. So there were moments where it was JSN and Bobo on the field and no Lockett. Yeah. So I don't know what was going on there. And obviously, of course, the whole offense just looked less functional. The conditions were really bad in that game, and everybody seemed to be kind of struggling. Well, not Josh Allen, but
yeah.
And then I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. It's like curious. We'll have to see going forward what happens. But I feel like maybe there was something going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, I was just kind of in the same boat. I saw, JSN getting a good amount of targets, but when that kind of popped up on the screen, I was like, oh my gosh, because I was watching all 4 games at once, and I was also trying to write the show sheet at the time, so I wasn't paying super close attention to all the stuff. But what I did see was Josh Allen did not have the problems that Geno Smith had playing in Seattle. So I mean, I don't know. I mean, Seattle, it seems like DK Metcalf might be the kind of the engine that keeps that passing game going a lot of the time. And we talk about losing, the opportunities that people get when somebody goes down, but a lot of the time, if players aren't of the talent level that we may think they are, and maybe speaking of JSN, they might not be able to deal with the added attention they get from defenses. And I mean, that's kind of seems like what may be happening. I was pretty nervous going into this week. I was like excited because it said, okay, there's this big opportunity in front of JSN, but then it's like, if he doesn't produce with, some of these opportunities, I don't know how long DK will be out, if it'll just be this week or maybe next week, but like, it's not super promising, him having that one big game this year, and that's about it. So kind of sad about the JSN performance this year.
Especially with that offense, with their high, like their pass rate over expected is far and away the most in the league. You would just expect him to be more of a part of that. And you have so many other indicators that he would have been. So I don't know what's going on there, but encouraging to see more usage today at least.
Yeah.
Yeah, only 29 pass attempts for Smith today. Of course, they just didn't run that many plays, I think, in part because the Bills were so effective on offense. James Cook with 111 yards. Like, you're doing a pretty good job keeping the ball away from Seattle there. One thing that's interesting is, I don't have the exact snap counts, but I think Cooper played most of at least half the snaps. I just saw something somewhere, but not exactly.
Looks like he played 38 of 69 snaps.
Okay,
I did see him go down at one point too. I don't know if he stayed down or came back in the game, but I did see him laying. Like I don't know if it was something that took him out of the game for a long period of time or not, but I did see him go down.
Interesting. Yeah. In any case, he plays still not a full game, but getting up there, but only 2 targets when you have Keon Coleman at 7, Khalil Shakir at 10. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Cooper's addition to the team does seem to have, ignited the offense, but he's not really benefiting from it. So, what do you make of Amari Cooper going forward?
Cooper wasn't necessarily playing super well in Cleveland either. I know he did last year. Obviously, he had really good efficiency last year.
With Flacco, at least.
Yeah, and I had him kind of pegged as somebody to watch this year coming into the year and everything. I expected more, but obviously everything we talked about earlier is kind of broken in Cleveland, and he's just getting used to this system. So like that kind of thing can be kind of difficult. We tend to probably underrate that, but wide receivers have a pretty complicated role, and it's difficult to get into the groove of that new offense, especially if it's not something that's related to an offense you're already in. So I imagine that he'll ramp up, but also I think a lot of what's happening with Keon Coleman might have just been destined to happen anyway.
Yeah.
I didn't have him necessarily pegged as like a super prospect, but he is a rookie that was the first pick in the second round, I think. And you would expect those players to get better as the season goes along.
Sure.
So that's not crazy.
Yeah. And I was always already thinking Shakir was a flex option at least, but do you guys feel like Coleman or Kincaid maybe in tight end premium might be flex options going forward? Like how comfortable would you guys be slotting those guys into your lineups after, they've both had a couple promising games over the last few games, and like in the Buffalo passing offense as a whole has been pretty promising over the past 2 games as well.
I tend to not run from Kincaid where I've got him. You just got to stay grounded with tight end. When we're talking about, I wrote about this for Pat last week, but I was talking about Mark Andrews a couple weeks ago, and I made this point. Like you're looking for, if you're going to shop for a tight end off of the waiver wire at this point, you're looking at like tight end 18, probably somewhere in that world. And so I just calculated from that, and I figured out, it's like 0.68 points per game that you're getting an advantage over Andrews at that point.
Yeah.
So you might as well just ride with Andrews, because that's something I would gladly sacrifice for the kind of upside that you have seen from him over, stretching over multiple years with the same quarterback and largely the same system. And so I just have kind of had that same mentality about Kincaid. It doesn't surprise me. I've just continued to play him. It doesn't surprise me to see him emerge. I think I think I'm just going to stick with him where I've got him and just kind of in my mind, just think of him the same way I always have, which is kind of middle to back end, tight end one type, and not worry about it.
Yeah. And how are you feeling about Coleman? That's the big one. That's the one that's, I mean, he's been doing pretty well as of late. So how comfortable, I guess, would we be feeling throwing him into a flex going forward? I say last week was his first ever wide receiver 2 week. I mean, ever. It's only been 7 weeks he's been in the league, but every week before that, I mean, his high was 11.9 points. Yeah. So last week he had 16.5 points.
I don't know. I mean, it's gonna be roster dependent on whether or not I feel comfortable to play him, I think. But he's definitely somebody I'm interested in holding at this point. He's got my attention. We'll put it that way.
Yeah.
He's got a couple difficult matchups coming up. Miami and Kansas City in weeks 9 and 11 are both negative matchups, but his playoff schedule from week 14 on is really interesting. So he's someone who maybe you try and play the matchups. That does matter in some ways. But yeah, I think as bye weeks come and you get more desperate, and he's going to be someone that you're probably going to have to start. All right. I guess it's worth talking about the one tight end who didn't really participate in National Tight End Week, which is our favorite, Brock Bowers. Still led the team in receiving yards. So, only 5 targets, but I mean, Las Vegas didn't look like they were able to do much through the air at any rate. Only 209 passing yards total. Yeah, I mean, I don't think I'm too worried about Brock Bowers. I think Kansas City is a more difficult defense maybe than a lot of people realize, just because for so many years they've been, winning based on their offense, but they're actually a pretty tough matchup. So, I mean,
I don't have the info on it, but I mean, Spagnuolo has traditionally bracketed your best receiver. He's an eraser type, like a Bill Belichick, Mike Tomlin type, where he's going to figure out who you want to play with, and he's going to try to take them away. So when you have a situation like this where it's so obvious
right,
who they want to use, and you have the capacity and the personnel on defense to take care of him, it's not that surprising. They did still give him 5 targets, which was just 1 fewer than Myers.
Yeah.
So he just didn't happen to convert.
Right.
For a second there, I thought you were talking about Alexander Madison as the engine that drives that up.
Same number of targets, right?
Passing down back Alexander Madison.
Yeah. Given all the big tight end performances we had today, maybe this is, no. Is Brock Bowers still tight end 1 going into 2025 in all formats?
Yeah, I wouldn't overreact to this one. I think he's going to continue to. I think he's about to have the highest market share.
Yeah.
He's now that Devontae Adams is gone. Like you saw it already start last week. I think that's going to continue. He's sort of like the tight end version of what Malik Neighbors is right now. I shouldn't say that. Wandale Robinson's been a pretty good target owner, but like he's that. Like what you saw with CeeDee Lamb last year, he's that guy that's kind of left alone. And it's so obvious that that's the one. And he has the talent, usually, to take advantage of that. The big question with Las Vegas, of course, is their quarterback, and I don't know. I've never seen a coach that seems so interested in benching somebody. I feel like he cannot wait to get Desmond Ridder and to know the playbook enough to just get Minshew out of there.
Oh man. Yeah, for prior to this game, Bowers had 3 double-digit target games in a row, averaging 12 targets a game over the last 3 weeks. So, I mean, he's I think this is more of an aberration, and what we'll see going forward is more of the closer to the double-digit target thing. Although a lot of games in there without a touchdown, and that might be how it will be for a lot of the season, unfortunately. All right. Anything else we need to touch on before we call it a night?
I just as far as Eagles and Lions both blew out teams today. How are you guys feeling about their environments as far as fantasy goes for the rest of the season? I kind of just was going back and forth between like, who would you rather have, Saquon or Gibbs? You know, Amon-Ra St. Brown or AJ Brown. Laporta versus Goddard really isn't a big, I don't know if that's really a debate right now, unfortunately, but you know, there's some questions there that when you look at the two offenses back to back, I mean, there's some good questions. It's like, I mean, I don't know. It seems like the Eagles are starting to really like figure that out. I don't know if it just took a few weeks for Kellen Moore, but it's like Hurts looked a lot better today. I mean, I guess it was also, you know, Bengals probably aren't the toughest defense in the league, but at the same time, just kind of looking at those two as maybe the best 2 teams in the NFC going forward. They're both also really good for fantasy.
Yeah.
Man, the Commanders.
Hey, yeah.
Well, maybe though. I do think that the Eagles look real. They obviously have turned it on a lot more. I think it's also so weird how much effect T. Higgins seems to have on that Cincinnati offense. And maybe it's just a coincidence, but it just feels like every time he's gone, they just become so dysfunctional. It's really sad because he's probably not going to be on the team next year. And their response so far this year seems to be to jog out a bunch of tight ends and try to see if they can get them involved. And Gesicki was kind of up to the challenge a little bit today, but it just doesn't seem like as effective an offense when he's not there.
Right.
Yeah. The one thing, I guess, looking at the Commanders, it's just they're doing it without not a lot of playmakers, whereas as opposed to like where the Lions and Eagles have this like big wealth of talent. And that's the one thing that kind of scares me because obviously Jaden Daniels is the whole thing driving that. And if, you know, say like McLaurin goes down or that really scares me. Like hopefully we see like a huge Ben Sinnott, you know, emergence and uprisal, especially for all the best ball shares. But like, that's the one thing that does scare me a lot. I would love to see the Commanders make a big run, but it just seems like they're still going to be as far as contending like in the playoffs and stuff. I still feel like they're going to be a year or 2 away, but you know, well on their way, obviously. But it seems like the Lions and Eagles are ready right now, and it's awesome that they're also, you know, very good for fantasy too.
Yeah, it's hard for me to. I'm from Dallas originally, so maybe that has something to do with my hesitancy. But also, you remember like that Philly, they for a long time they really weren't themselves. Like they have large swaths of time now without AJ Brown and Devonta Smith, and so they're just now really kind of ramping up to like what we kind of expected them to be. And that obviously you talk about stars. Like I mean, they've just got so many options. So yeah, they do look a lot better with everybody going right now.
Yeah. The Lions are an interesting team in kind of the same way the Commanders are, in that they are playing well, and they have the playmakers, but in terms of the fantasy output, it's maybe not quite what you're hoping for. I think this is the second game in a row when they've blown out a team and Goff has thrown like fewer than 25 passes, maybe.
I think he had fewer than 100 yards today. Is that right?
He had 85, but 3 touchdowns. So
good
yeah, like everybody caught a touchdown, and everybody had 2 targets. So
golly, that's crazy.
Amon-Ra St. Brown, 2 targets, 7 yards and a touchdown. Khalif Raymond, 2 targets, 14 yards and a touchdown. Laporta had 6 targets and had 48 yards and a touchdown. He was really kind of the only one who would have had an okay game without the touchdown. But I mean, even when you're drafting St. Brown, 7 yards and a touchdown, like the touchdown's nice, but that's not getting it done.
Yeah.
So yeah, how worried are we that, I don't know, the Lions are too good?
They certainly have that thing that teams do, where if they can just run on you and get out of here with a win, they're going to do it.
Yeah.
And the better they get, the more frequently it seems to happen. And so that is a concern. And it's what the Ravens do too, you know.
Yeah.
But you know that, like, I tend to think in terms of, like, when it comes to fantasy, I tend to think in terms of upside a lot.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to plug it. I think you can survive if your guy gets 4 catches, one catch for 7 yards and a touchdown, and that's disappointing. If he has the capacity to score, 140 yards and 2 touchdowns, I'm going to keep putting him in there, because what you're losing, it's kind of what I was saying with Andrews earlier, what you're losing by playing him is not nearly what you're gaining.
Yeah.
If the best possible outcome happens.
Yeah.
So you just keep playing them just like you've done with the Ravens, outside of Derrick Henry, you have this, well, even him, like you always have that thing with the Ravens where you're worried that this is not going to be my guy's week. Actually, probably the most consistent guy has probably been Zay Flowers. But Henry can be game scripted out if you get behind. Doesn't happen with them very often, fortunately. If you get way ahead, we've seen it twice this year where Lamar, he had like 15 attempts in one game one time. We've seen, that affects all the pass catchers. So we talked about Andrews earlier and how when they get ahead, they get in these jumbo type formations and they just kind of run it out, and this is the same thing that's going to happen probably with the Lions going forward. And the good news is they're probably going to be ahead a lot, and that's probably going to be good for Jahmyr Gibbs.
Yeah. All right, I think that'll do it for us. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Special thank you to Mat Irby for joining us. You can catch all of his work at Legendary Upside. Currently, he's writing. How often are you putting out articles over there?
Pretty much, man. I'm doing basically all the island games. So it's and they're lengthy. It's called the Quick Slant, which is probably a horrible name for it, because they end up being 2,000, 2,500 word articles, and they're actually pretty comprehensive. But I write for them. I write for him 4 times a week sometimes. And then I also actually write one for the Fantasy Footballers, which comes out on Monday. It's a reaction piece. So it'd be kind of similar. It's kind of adjacent to what we're talking about here.
Awesome. Yeah, forgot about that one. But yeah, definitely go check out Matt's work at Legendary Upside, at the Fantasy Footballers. Hopefully we'll get you back writing at RotoViz in the off season, perhaps, and catch more of your work over there. But yeah, also be sure to like and subscribe the YouTube channel or podcast channel. I don't know. Do the YouTube things that you're supposed to do. Yeah, and I believe you can still get a discount for a RotoViz subscription with the code RVRadio2024. 10% off. So check that out if you haven't already. And that will do it for us tonight. Talk at you next time.